Morning, all. All right, so I've got teams on the board here that could make the playoffs in the East. We've got two teams that are currently above the playoff line that are Pittsburgh and the Islanders. They are the wild cards. Below the line, you have Washington, Florida, Buffalo, Detroit, and Ottawa. So the question becomes one of so which teams are going to make it, and which ones aren't. Well, if we look at just the points percentage right now, Pittsburgh has the best one at 573. Despite their struggles, they are still the one that's most likely to end up getting in. So I'm wearing their gear. Buffalo, though, 556 is second best. So for Buffalo, with 60 points in 54 games, they are actually in a position where they could be the best if they continue to produce at that rate. And of course, that would depend on the Islanders, Washington, Florida. And what's interesting is that the Islanders, Florida, and Washington all have lower points percentages than both Buffalo and Detroit. So yesterday on the channel, I did put up a poll on whether or not people felt Detroit could make the playoffs. Reason I did that is because Detroit's been doing well lately. Now they did have the back-to-back wins against Vancouver, which, and I've talked about this, Vancouver being pretty much in tank mode at this point. But I think they're playing well. And though they lost last night against Seattle, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt because they did well in their Western swing. And their overall points percentage is still higher than the Islanders, Washington, and Florida. And Ottawa's on the board because why not, right? Ottawa's not very likely to make it. I also want to say I used the Detroit magnet I used because that's the one that fits on this board. The Red Wings logo is it's a wide one, so if I was going to fit that in there, the only one that fits is the one with that's an octopus. So I apologize. But at any rate, Pittsburgh, 63 points. They've played 55 games. 573 points percentage is the best on the board. They're 4-4-2 in their last 10. Now, coming up the rest of February, they're at home against the Islanders and Edmonton first. Then they go on the road and play St. Louis. Then they go out and then they come home and play Tampa before they go back out on the road and play Nashville. So, not really a great pattern here. Just two at home, one away, one at home, one away. But then you get into March, they have 8 games at home and 7 away from home. Now, if they can improve their road record, that will help them a great deal. Their road record 12-12-5, their home record 15-7-4. So they're doing well at home, their road record is a problem. And then for April, they're at home for 4 games and they're away for 3. So overall, they've got 3 home games and 2 on the road, 8 at home, 7 on the road, 4 at home, 3 on the road. That should help them get in the playoffs. Depending, of course, on goaltending, depending on their defense and what they do at the deadline. But the other thing that helps them is, and I double counted on this too to make sure, 13 of the remaining 27 games are against playoff teams, which doesn't sound like it's a lot, and it's roughly half for some, but that's not bad. That's winnable. And because they've already got the best points percentage on the board, I think Pittsburgh's going to make it. I've always said I don't bet against Pittsburgh. This is true of regular season anyways, and they should make it. Now, the Islanders, it's a little bit sketchier. 63 points in 59 games for a 534 points percentage. They are 5-3-2 in their last 10. So they're doing well over their last 10. The rest of this month, first they're at Pittsburgh. So that's the next game for both of them is against each other. Then they're at home against Winnipeg, against LA, and then they go out on the road and they play Winnipeg and they play Minnesota. So they're going to play a role in how well things go for Winnipeg as well over the next week or so. Then in March and April, their schedule gets lighter. They have 12 games in March, 6 at home, 6 away from home. And then 6 in April, 3 at home and 3 away from home. They are better at home than away from home. They're 17-10-3 at home. That 11-14-4 away from home could very well cost them the playoffs. Unless they're able to win at a better rate away from home than what they have, they probably finish below the line here. But working in their favor a little bit is that only 11 of their final 23 games are against playoff teams. We are into that sketchy part of the year too, where just because you've got games against, say, Boston, games against, for instance, Tampa, Toronto, anybody else that's kind of in a spot where they're not going to move, they might be resting guys. They might not take the game as seriously as the other teams might. So strength of schedule can be a little bit deceiving at this time of year, but I still thought it was worth putting on the board. Then you got Washington, who seem to be just catapulting out of the race, although they're only 1 point back. They've got a game in hand on the Islanders as well. 534 points percentage for them too. 3-7 record over their last 10, though. I think it's 4 in a row they've lost now in regulation. It's getting uglier. That outdoor game last night, that was rough. So the rest of this month, they're at home against Detroit. Then they are at home against Anaheim and the Rangers before they finish the month at Buffalo. So of those 4 games, 3 of them are against teams that are below the line. 2 of them are against teams that are on the board here. That could help them out. Then in March, they have 6 at home, 8 away from home, and in April, 4 at home and 2 away from home. Their home and away records are very similar. At home, they're 14-11-3. Away from home, they're 14-13-3. They have to start winning games. Whether Ovechkin's back in the next game, whether he's back in a week, whenever he's back, it doesn't matter. They need to start winning games now. And I don't know that they're going to, is the thing. Like, watching them recently, it's just, and even before Ovechkin left the team, this was a team that was struggling to score goals. Now, of their final 24 games, 13 are against playoff teams. So again, you take that with a grain of salt, because there's going to be teams that have already figured out where they are in the standings and may not put in the same amount of effort as the Capitals, who are fighting for their playoff lives. But it's still worthy of note that their schedule is not easy. And the fact they have 24 games left as opposed to how many games other teams have left works against them as well. That's one thing where Pittsburgh's good too. They have more games left than some of the teams they're fighting against. Then you get to Florida, one of the most baffling teams in the league. 62 points in 59 games, 525 points percentage, one of the lowest on the board. They're 5-4-1 in their last 10. And it's just been frustrating to watch these guys this year. It has been so frustrating because they get it together and they look like they've got everything going, and then it just falls right off the rails, sometimes in the same game. So for the rest of this month, it's pretty quiet rest of the month for them. They're at home against Anaheim, at home against Buffalo, and then they go and they play in Tampa. Now, again, they have that game against Buffalo, so Buffalo's going to have some say in where they are on this board by the end of the month, right? And then they have 9 at home, 5 away from home in March. And in April, they have 4 at home and 2 away from home. The home record for Florida is good, 15-8-3. Their road record is not, 13-17-3. And that's really handicapped them in terms of their ability to be well above these teams. They wouldn't be up with Tampa if they had a better road record, but they wouldn't be in this position if they had a better road record. They wouldn't even be on the board because they'd be like, well, Florida's going to make it, because they have 68, 69 points, 70 points, right? Somewhere in that range. So of their remaining games, 10 are against playoff teams out of 23. So now again, as I mentioned, they have 1 against Buffalo. Here, they're not above the playoff line, so we can have that discussion of, what strength of schedule really means at this point in the year. But yeah, for Florida, this is a tough position. They are tied with the Islanders for the most games played on this board. And again, their points percentage is one of the lower points percentages, along with Washington and the Islanders. And then you get to Buffalo, 60 points in 54 games, 6-3-1 in their last 10. For the rest of this month, they're moderately busy. They have 5 games left before the end of the month, which is almost the most on the board. They're at home against Toronto, so that's a big game right there. Then they go to Tampa, and then they go to Florida. So the next 3 games could give us a really good idea of where Buffalo's at. Then they're at home against Washington and Columbus to close out the month. Those are winnable games. I say that despite Columbus being a tough out recently. So for March, they have 9 at home and they have 6 away from home. Then April, they have 2 at home and 6 away from home. Now, Buffalo's kind of the opposite of some of the teams on this board. Their home record is frustrating. They're 11-14-2 at home. That absolutely could cost them. Away from home, they're 17-8-2. Their road record is what's keeping them on the board. Their road record's what's making it so that it looks like they could end up finishing with a wildcard spot. But of their 28 remaining games, 16 are against playoff teams. So their schedule is not an easy one from here. This is where that strength of schedule comes up. And again, as I'm mentioning here, and I'll throw it out here too, some of those teams that look like they're going to be really, really tough may not be as tough once you get to those games because they've already got their spot in the playoffs locked down. So for Buffalo, it's going to be interesting because the only thing that can stop Buffalo from making the playoffs really right now is Buffalo's home record. I really think that with their home record, they've got 9 out of 15 at home in March, and they've got 3 out of 5 at home for the rest of February. That could take them out, so that even though they have 6 out of 8 in April on the road, I don't know that necessarily saves them, but we'll see. Then you got Detroit, who've forced their way into the conversation. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They've got 60 points in 55 games, so that's a 545 points percentage. Not bad. For the rest of this month, they're busy. They're at Washington first. Then they come home and they play the Rangers in Tampa. And then they've got back-to-back games in Ottawa. So if Ottawa wants to push themselves up the board and say, hey, we're here, they have to beat Detroit both times, I would think, right? Detroit would be looking to beat Ottawa both times and just basically end their hopes and dreams right there, because teams have done that to Detroit for a while, so they would definitely enjoy doing that to somebody else for a change as we're getting close to the end of February. And remember, if you're a Detroit fan, you guys are on the board near the end of February. That's not bad. So in March, they have 8 at home and 7 away from home. April, they have 3 at home and 4 away from home. So pretty balanced schedule from here. At home, they're 14, 11, and 3. Away from home, thanks to this road trip, they're 12, 10, and 5. And they have the third highest points percentage on the board at 545. So by points percentage, they're right in this. They've played one more game than has Buffalo, and they have the same number of points. So these two could very well end up being the ones who are fighting for that last spot where the Islanders currently reside. Now, 15 of the remaining 27 games are against playoff teams. And something I've mentioned as well. So you've got the Islanders, who only have 23 games left. You have Detroit with 27, Pittsburgh with 27, Ottawa and Buffalo both with 28. But that also means these guys are going to have more back-to-backs. They're going to have a tougher time of it, less turnaround, whereas the Islanders will have more days off, more practice time. So the extra games are key, but you have to win them. And we've seen situations before where a team might have a bunch of games in hand and then they fritter them away. And before you know it, they're actually not above that playoff line as expected. Now, Ottawa, 56 points of 54 games. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10, desperately clinging to the hopes that they can get here. And again, if you look at it just purely from a New York Islanders perspective, they're 7 points back of the Islanders with 5 games in hand. They have 4 games in hand on Washington, 5 games in hand on Florida. The tricky part is Buffalo and Detroit, they do not have that amount of games in hand on. That 519 points percentage is the lowest on the board. Their remaining schedule this month, they're at home against St. Louis today. Then they're in Boston, in Carolina, in Montreal. That 3-game swing should be interesting. Montreal, I know they're below the playoff line and nowhere near it, but still, Ottawa and Montreal games are usually a lot of fun. Then they're at home against Detroit for that 2-game set. Again, it's back-to-backs to close out the month. In March, they're at home for 6. They're on the road for 9. And then in April, they're at home for 3 and on the road for 4. That doesn't help Ottawa. Ottawa at home, 15, 12, and 2. On the road, 11, 12, and 2. So they do have more road games left than home games, and they're not as good on the road as they are at home. So that definitely hurts their chances. 14 of the remaining 28 games are against teams above the playoff line currently. And again, while I was putting this together, I was thinking, well, should I just have the ones above the playoff line, or should I include the ones that are close? It was like, nah, I don't want to muddy the waters too much. So if I had to say, all right, who do I think makes the playoffs? I think Pittsburgh's still in good shape. I know how rough things have been for them over the last month or so, but I still think Pittsburgh makes the playoffs. That being said, Florida's capable of going on a run. They've shown that at times. They just haven't. They just have not gone on a run. And they've been in their own way, and they've tripped over their own feet a little too much for my liking this year. I still like Buffalo. I do. In January, when I did my predictions, I said I think Buffalo makes the playoffs this year. I still think that Buffalo, the one thing is they have to start winning at home. You have to start winning at home if you're Buffalo. Whatever routines you have on the road, bring them home. Bring them home. And I've seen situations where teams will stay in hotels at home to avoid distractions. Maybe that's what Buffalo needs, right? Maybe they need to avoid any distractions at home just in order to make the playoffs. But for Buffalo, if they were to make the playoffs, that would be absolutely huge. I do think that for Washington, even though they're a point out, I just don't see them making it. Unless something dramatic happens with this team, it doesn't feel like it's there. But the point of this is something simple. Again, to point out where everybody is and who's most likely to make it, and then ask you people the same question. Which teams do you think end up making it? And again, Detroit is definitely in the hunt. Any team that's on the board is technically in the hunt, but again, for Ottawa, it's going to be tough. But let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.